As a developmental editor, I read a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. A lot of prologues also cross my desk. Writers, I've got to be honest with you, I recommend that those prologues get cut probably 50 to 60% of the time. I'm not a prologue hater. When they're done well, when they work, I love them. But prologues aren't exempt from the guidelines governing what we need from a first chapter. Last week, I did a video called Your First Chapter Has 3 Jobs. Those 3 jobs are establishing character, specifically the protagonist, and grounding their character arc, establishing conflict that character has, which, as a bonus, creates tension and therefore narrative traction, and establishing world, which is particularly important in sci-fi fantasy. Prologues often focus on number 3 at the detriment of number 1 and number 2. Here are some signs that a prologue might not actually be necessary. First is if it doesn't feature a main character. Those first few pages are vital real estate. They're your chance to grab the reader and get them invested in the protagonist's story or the story of one of the main point of view characters. If you're focusing on a historical figure who's been dead for 5,000 years, who's never really even going to show up on the page in person throughout the book or series, that could be a wasted opportunity. Second is starting with a myth, a dream sequence, or otherwise vague narrative, which makes it difficult for the reader to tell who's telling that story in that prologue. Mysteries can be compelling, but they're only compelling insofar as the reader wants to see the protagonist find the solution. Until the reader knows or cares about the protagonist and the story itself, they're probably not going to care about that mystery too much. For me, though, the biggest red flag is the "this is the way the world was formed" prologue. Fantasy and sci-fi world building can be really difficult to incorporate into the first few chapters of the story, so it's really tempting to have almost like an info dump prologue that sets the stage, grounds the reader in the world, makes everything clear. They know the world's history and now they can go forth and start the story. And it's tempting to do that as a writer because we find our world building interesting. That's why we spent so much time building it. But our readers only care about world building insofar as it impacts the characters who are driving that story. So satisfying that big number 3 and giving the reader the intro to the world isn't going to work unless we're also connecting them to a compelling character. This was Tips from a Fiction Editor, and if you have more questions about prologues, hit me up in the comments.